Recycling goes back to, I would say, the very beginning of the environmentalist movement. If you go back to the 1950s and 1960s in particular, you see that a lot of the concern that people have about endangered nature comes from littering as a problem. So you see packaging, empty bottles, cigarettes, etc. Byproducts of our consumer habits are becoming a problem, so we need to deal with that in some way. I have looked at in my own scholarship the idea of bottle and can recycling, how that became defined as a problem and what people have done to solve that. Recycling as an activity has a much both longer but also bigger history than just this one little story about consumer recycling. One of the key motivations for recycling historically has been the idea of resource scarcity. I mean, you just don't have enough of one particular resource, so to solve that problem you reuse it. So recycling is part of what we call the 4 Re's: reduce, reuse, recycle, and then there's some discussion then about what is the 4th R. I've seen a lot of different variations of this. So it could be to rethink, to refuse, to rebuy. Renewable is another one. But it all comes down to this idea of thinking carefully about the act of consuming, of spending something. What recycling really does for you, I mean, it varies basically from where and when you are. The industrialized West, we seldom recycle for economic reasons anymore. For us, then it becomes more a way of, in a way, living or practicing what we preach when you think about environmental values. We do our little bit, no matter how small it is. The key point is that recycling is a way of caring for the environment. When it comes to the industrial side of recycling, I think we see even more complex story, really. So, because a lot of companies do engage extensively in recycling of materials. It's a way of saving quite a lot of money for them, in some cases also preserving materials that are hard to get even. But at the same time, it's also a way for them to portray themselves as being environmentally friendly and caring for the environment. A trend that you see is that there's a lot of activity of companies trying to develop automated solutions for this, where you have technologies with sensors that actually handles the waste sorting, so it all in a way happens out of sight and out of mind. We don't really need to worry about what happens with our waste. I think one of the interesting things about recycling is the way that it puts those decisions and the thinking about the consequences and what happens with these materials, it puts them right in our own lives, in our everyday lives. So we need to make these choices about what do we do with this waste, where does it go. So for recycling to be really effective, it also requires that the waste is sorted in particular categories where some materials belong together with others. It also requires a lot of social organization. And because of this, it proves to be much more effective in some parts of the world than others. So it's a very extensive, in a way, disciplining of consumers to behave in particular ways. I mean, Scandinavia, for instance, has extremely high rates of bottle and can recycling. Here it's very much a result of the bottle deposit. So you get, when you return your bottle to the store for recycling, you get a little bit of money back. So there's a small financial incentive that has been very successful in actually getting people to do this. You see in other countries like Japan, they have a very elaborate system in some places for the recycling and sorting of household waste, and it can be up to like 40, 50 different categories. A lot of people ask themselves, why does this matter? Why does this tiny little activity matter when the challenges that the world is facing are so big? There are 2 sides to this, though. I mean, one is the idea of raising awareness and making people think about their own lives. In a way, it's the related 4th activity that people often come to think about in the act of recycling. The other one is the aggregated effect. So it doesn't matter if one person does it, but what happens if 1 million people do it? What happens if 1 billion people do it? And so on. And there's an extensive technology story to that side too. You know, how do you then harness all these individual actions into something bigger? In many ways, recycling ends up with being a question about value. So economic value, which can be insignificant at times, at other times it's more important. So you see this often with the fluctuating interests among companies to actually buy and reuse the waste that people recycle. But it's also a question about social values. What is the kind of responsibility you want to take for the waste that you produce?